Hey everyone. So, doing something a little different today. It is Friday, and I was going to post my Friday factoid, but honestly, I have been doing a lot of typing lately. Um, Basically, my job is sending a lot of emails, and then I also have to send a lot of emails not during my regular job. And then, of course, I'm trying to write novels, and that's all typing. And so, honestly, I'm just tired of typing. I just needed a break. So I thought, why not just do a quick video? So here I am. Anyway, hopefully this will come out okay. We'll see what happens. But today I actually wanted to talk about how looking up a name for a fictional town in my weird Western ended up solving some plot holes. They weren't necessarily plot holes, but I didn't know how the characters were going to do something yet. And coming up with a name for this town actually solved everything and led to um, a big plot development and also a way for me to introduce the main character Van to the lady who will eventually be a love interest. But I was really struggling to figure out how to get them to meet because I wanted them to meet as soon as possible. But Van is really not in the market for a love interest right now. Um, so I couldn't just have it be like a chance, oh, they bump into each other and ooh, he's cute and she's pretty and oh, hey, I might like that person because that's totally not where his head is at this moment. If I had them have an encounter like that, he would forget her in like 2 seconds. So it had to be something a lot more significant. But I also wanted her to be a certain type of person, and pretty much the only types of people that he would have extended contact with right now are also, pretty much unsavory people, and I didn't really want her to be like that. So I was still not entirely sure how she was going to come in yet. I also wasn't sure he needed to rob a bank, and I had no idea how he was going to do that. So, usually with my longer novels, I tend to plot them out pretty detailed, so I would have kind of had all this figured out already. I did not in this case. You guys already know, this was supposed to be just a short story. Basically, the first chapter was supposed to be the end of it. Obviously, that didn't happen. So I have just been literally actually pantsing this novel, which I don't usually do anymore. But it's actually worked out really well up to this point. So as they say, every book is different. It's very true. Also, every genre is different. I really can't pants the complex science fiction or fantasy novels. I found out it does not work at all. So those definitely have to be more plotted. This one, however, I was going into the chapter that was supposed to have the bank robbery and still had no idea what was going to happen. So, first of all, though, I needed a name for this town that they were going to where the bank robbery was going to take place. Now, this is a weird Western, so um, it is fictionalized to an extent, but I wanted it to be almost actually like a dystopian. So I am still setting it in the real world. However, it's going to be like really, really, really far future, basically. Kind of like a Mad Max style thing. So that being the case, I could keep some names the same, possibly. They would have lasted all this time, but also I wanted some things to be different. So this one, I was going to make up a name for it, but I didn't quite want it to be like the other two towns that I had detailed already, Brave Bank and Grave Gulch. I wanted it to be a little bit slightly more realistic. So I thought, maybe I'll do some research and I'll see, what are some town names from like the 1800s that maybe have changed names since then or like aren't around anymore, etc., etc. Well, when I did that, I actually did not find many actual just lists of towns from back then, unless they were towns that still existed today. And I found a big list of those towns, but that's not really what I wanted. So I kept looking around, and then I got to a post about weird names, like weird names of towns that actually exist like right now. Which you can kind of see here. This was basically the search result that I ended up looking into, and I was like, "Wow, are you serious?" Um, Apparently these are real, which is just insane to me. I can't imagine having an address that has some of these town names on them. But the point is that I saw this picture right here, which is apparently a real town. And for some reason that stuck with me. So I considered some other names for a little bit, but I kept coming back to Blessing. So I thought that would actually be kind of ironic to have this town, in the middle of this like dystopian West world, basically, have the name of Blessing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with that. That's what's really keeps sticking in my mind, so we're going to go with that. So I called the town Blessing, which ended up being great fun because, of course, then you can make a bunch of references to if the town is actually a blessing or a curse, etc., etc., etc. But then I thought, okay, a lot of towns' names come from, like, there's a reason towns are named what they are, right? So I thought, okay, this town of Blessing, why did they call it Blessing? And I thought, well, probably because they found something there that they considered a blessing. Well, what would that be? In this world, I made it so that there's a lot of kind of what you would consider like technology or machines building ruins, etc., buried kind of like under the dirt, and the stuff's kind of grown up over it. Basically, nature has reclaimed these old cities, and other things, cars and tanks and who knows what else. So when the people of the current world find these things, they consider it like a blessing, essentially, because they use that scrap for resources for various other things, or can sell it for money, etc., etc. So I thought, okay, so they found this massive stash of stuff maybe, and they thought it was a blessing. Well, then, kind of like the old mining towns, this whole town sprang up around this giant, stash of stuff that was buried. And so essentially now you have all these people who are trying to mine out that scrap and use it and sell it and yada, yada, yada. So it kind of created this whole scenery, I guess, just from that word, from the town name, and asking myself, well, why is it called this? And then that led to the reason it was called that, which was the stash, which then created the whole culture of the town. So you think, who would be inhabiting this kind of town, and, who would be running the town. So, you figure you have these, like, metal merchants who kind of made their fortune selling off this kind of stuff to other people. And, they probably are the ones running the town. So, they employ their own law enforcement, and they kind of are the bigwigs of the place. And then you think, okay, well, if they're running the place, well, they're not going to want to do the work themselves. They're going to want other people to do the work for them. And in this world, I did figure that it was probably some kind of slavery, at least in some parts. So then that opens that up. Okay, well then maybe they're like, kidnapping people and forcing them to go down into these ruins and bring all this stuff up. Well, then that leads to thinking, okay, well then in this town, there's going to be a lot of these people who are basically, slaves trying to get all this metal and scrap out. And then once I came to that conclusion, I realized that that actually solves a lot of problems for me as far as the plot goes, because the girl that Van meets, Charlotte, could actually be one of those slaves made to go down into the ruins, which means that that's how he can meet her, and they can actually have more of a prolonged contact because of that, because he actually can see those people as a way to help them rob the bank, essentially. So I'm not going to go into any more detail there, because obviously I want you to read the book to get all the details, but essentially all of that will play into Van robbing the bank. And then also that will allow him and Charlotte, is the girl's name, to interact for a longer period of time because he sees her as useful to him, which sounds rude, but that's the only way he would keep up a prolonged contact with anyone outside of his focus right now. Because right now, his focus is 100% getting his sister back, which is why he has to rob this bank in the first place. That's the only reason he's doing it. So that was perfect because it worked out that now they can have enough contact that it will start off that relationship, for later. I won't go too far in this book, but it's definitely going to be a thing that carries through later books in interesting ways. And then also that enables me to give Charlotte her more proper background, but make it reasonable, like that she would actually run into Van and have anything to do with him for any amount of time. So it actually solved, like 3 problems basically. It solved Charlotte's backstory problem. It solved Van even entertaining her presence for longer than 2 seconds problem, and it solved, how in the heck are they going to rob this bank in this super busy town where, everyone's all about money and very alert as to what's going on, basically, in the town. So I thought that was just really interesting how, just finding a town's name set all of this off, like a domino effect. But honestly, this kind of thing happens a lot when I write, and I know it happens for a lot of other writers too because they've told me about it, and it's a really cool thing that happens. But usually when it happens, I'm like, oh yes, this is so perfect. How crazy that happened. And then I forget all about it because, there's a million other things going on. But this time it worked out really well because I had this Friday factoid coming up and I thought, hey, I can talk about that. And then that way I will also remember that that's actually how it happened. Because if you ask me, hey, what are some other examples of times this happened, I could definitely not list them for you, but I can tell you that it happens all the time, at least a couple times for each book. But in this case, I thought this was a very interesting example. So there you go. That is the Friday factoid for this week. It is a little bit later, but I've had a lot of things going on and I'm super tired this week. So that's a whole nother story. Won't get into that right now. But anyway, I hope you found this a little interesting, and I will see you all next week. Bye!